Well, the FAA this morning had a serious system error nationwide on all their computers, apparently, and required a full reboot and restart. I don't know if they have a backup system or what's going on with it. There's still nobody seems to know anything, and it's too early, and there's too much chaos currently. And then also, I don't know if it was hacked or something, so that they don't want to expose vulnerabilities in their computer system by talking about it too much. But I think it's certainly crazy what's going on. Hope everyone's having a good morning here, and I want to read about some software stuff today, since it's the first time that the FAA has grounded all the airplanes since 9/11. Some interesting things about the FAA on 9/11. Too is the Mike Canavan was nowhere to be found and was like late for work for over a hour on 9/11. And Michael Canavan, he was in charge of he was in charge of the FAA's for civil aviation security, and he was out of place and prevented in some way. And I don't know if he ever testified to the 9/11 Commission or was really, gave a detailed accounts of his whereabouts and whatnot. Oh, is that sound playing? No. I want to stop that screen share and do a new screen share so you guys can see who Michael Canavan is. I'll post this in the people, anyone wants to look him up, but also Ben Sliney was he's a retired lawyer, and he was an air traffic controller and former federal aviation administrator, or national operations manager. His first day in this position was on September 11th, 2001, and he was responsible for ordering a ground stop across the United States airspace in response to the 9/11 attacks. So I thought that that's coincidental, because he was the one that was responsible for ordering the FAA National Ground Stop on 9/11. It's just interesting that he was hired. His first day of the job was 9/11, and he's a Wall Street lawyer with, I don't know if he has any. He doesn't no experience. There's no experience that he has that put him in this position, and it's really strange that he's just a Wall Street lawyer put in charge of this position on 9/11, and he left the FAA to practice law. So he came out of law, joined the FAA, and then went back to law. It seems, because I don't really see that he had military service or pilot history or a history working for the FAA or something. It's just really weird. One of those weird 9/11 coincidences that you run into when you start looking into the history of this stuff. But yeah, this is kind of crazy, unprecedented, and historical what happened this morning, and how it relates to 9/11. Speaking of which, I wanted to bring out one of my favorite books about 9/11. It's called Crossing the Rubicon. Whoop. I went to do solo layout, and it's by Michael C. Ruppert. And the foreword in this book is by Catherine Austin Fitz. So I'm going to read from this book while we watch some footage of this whole disaster as unfolding. This is from chapter 10 of the book. A year before the 9/11 attacks, From the Wilderness completed a major investigation that had begun when Michael Ruppert was contracted by two members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police's National Security Staff. The focus of that investigation was on an almost mythical computer software program that was to later be part of and connected to insider trading on 9/11. New U.S. government programs peering into Americans' private lives, resource management, biological warfare, and also, as revealed by Fox News shortly after the attacks, in the hands of Osama bin Laden. The following story appeared in the September 2000 special edition from the Wilderness, Volume 3, Number 7. It's edited for length. U.S. journalist Mike Ruppert, a former Los Angeles police officer who now runs a website that seeks to expose CIA covert operations, said he met with RCMP investigator McDade on August 3rd in LA. Ruppert said the RCMP officer was anxious to see documents he received 3 years ago from a shadowy Green Beret named Bill Tyre, Tyre, detailing the sale of rigged PROMIS, capital PROMIS software to Canada. The Toronto Star, September 4th, 2000. Only the legends of Excalibur, the sword of invincible power, and the Holy Grail, the chalice from which Christ took his wine at the Last Supper, begin to approach the mysterious aura that has evolved in the world of secret intelligence around a computer software program named PROMIS. Let me turn on my light so I can see a little bit better. Hold on a second. There we go. PROMIS, which stands for Prosecutors Management Information System. Okay. Crossed a threshold in the evolution of computer programming, working from either huge. So, this NSA computer programmer engineer Bill Hamilton, this is his name, so people can go look this guy up. Huge mainframe computer systems or smaller networks powered by the progenitors of today's PCs. PROMIS, from its first test drive a quarter century ago, was able to do one thing that no other program had ever been able to do. It was able to simultaneously read and integrate any number of different computer programs or databases simultaneously, regardless of the language in which the original programs had been written or the operating systems or platforms on which the database was then currently installed. Note, this applies only when PROMIS had actually been physically installed on the computer systems. In the mid-1970s, at least as far as computer programs were concerned, the universal translator of Star Trek had become a reality, and the realm of Star Trek is exactly where most of the major media would have the general public place the PROMIS story in their worldviews. But given the fact that the government of Canada has just spent millions of dollars investigating whether or not a special version of PROMIS equipped with a so-called backdoor has compromised its national security, one must concede that perhaps the myths surrounding PROMIS and what has happened to it just need to be reevaluated. Myths, by definition, cannot be solved, but facts can be understood and integrated. Only very few people realize how big the PROMIS story really is. It's difficult to relegate PROMIS to the world of myth and fantasy when so many tangible things like the recently acknowledged RCMP investigation make it real. Canadians are not known for being wildly emotional types given to sprees, and one must also include the previous findings of congressional oversight committees and no less than 6 obvious dead bodies, ranging from investigative journalist Danny Casolaro. So Danny Casolaro. I just want to get the spelling right on these things so people can look these things up. Yes. Casolaro. Anyways, it's to a government employee named Alan Standorf. to a British publisher and a lifelong Israeli agent, Robert Maxwell, also in 1991, to retired Army CID investigator Bill McCoy in 1997, to a father and son named Abernathy in a small northern California town named Hercules. The fact that commercial versions of PROMIS are now available for sale directly from Inslaw bellies the fact that some major papers and news organizations instantly and laughably use the epithet conspiracy theorist to stigmatize anyone who discusses it. Fear may be the major obstacle or ingredient in the myth surrounding modified or enhanced versions of PROMIS that keep researchers from fully pursuing leads risking in its wake. I was validated on this theory on September 23rd in a conversation with contributing editor Peter Dale Scott, a professor emeritus at UC Berkeley and noted author. Scott, upon hearing the details of my involvement, frankly told me that PROMIS frightened him. Casolaro, who was found dead in a West Virginia motel room in 1991, had Scott's name. Scott is also a Canadian in a list of people to contact about his PROMIS findings, and he never got that far. A close examination of the PROMIS saga actually leads to more than a dozen deaths that may well be why so many people avoid it. And many of those deaths share in common a pattern where within 48 hours of death, bodies are cremated, residences are sanitized, and all files disappear. This was certainly the case with my friend Bill McCoy, the legendary retired Army CID investigator who was also the principal investigator for Hamilton in his quest to recover what may be hundreds of millions of in lost royalties to reunite him with the evolved progeny of his brainchild. Those progeny now have names like SMART, self-managing artificial reasoning technology, and tech. I will never forget hearing of McCoy's death and his immediate cremation. And this is just fascinating looking back 20 years reading Michael C. Ruppert's work here, because how the AI and computer software has evolved since then, it has been leaps and bounds. In researching this story, I found a starkly recurring theme, and it first appeared in a recent statement I tape recorded from probably one of the three best informed open sources about the story, William Tyree. I also came across this same theme almost verbatim in a research paper that I discovered while following leads from other sources. The information from Tyree recorded in a phone conversation on August 28, 2000, and the research work on block modeling social research theory uncovered while researching other leads both describe the same unique position or vantage point from hypothetical and actual perspectives. Tyree described an actual physical point in space further out than ever thought possible and now used by U.S. satellites. This distance is made possible by PROMIS progeny, so evolved that they make the original software look primitive. The socialist research, which included pioneering mathematical work, apparently facilitating the creation of artificial intelligence, postulated that a similar remote hypothetical position would eliminate randomness from all human activity. Everything would be visible in terms of measurable and predictable patterns. The ultimate big picture, just one of the key websites where I found this information, was on syracuse.edu, by Martin SocialNet. I don't know if that link is still good, but one of so let's get jump ahead a little bit. So for more than a half year, members of this Royal Canadian Mounted Police have been traveling through the U.S., often in the company of a savvy female homicide detective named Sue Todd from the small California town of Hercules. Even now, questions linger as to what the Canadians were really after, but there is absolutely no question that while surreptitiously in the U.S., the Mounties spent more time with author and investigative reporter Sherry Seymour than with anyone else, and for good reason. Seymour, under the pen name of Carol Marshall and the author of a meticulously researched ebook called The Last Circle, our fact checker at From the Wilderness has found the book to be meticulously researched and documented, and opinion shared by Bill Hamilton and the RCMP, who have also told me of its precision. I first met Sherry in person this spring after she had contacted me via the internet. I traveled to her home some 3 hours outside of Los Angeles and viewed acres of documentation for a saga that started with drug related murders and police corruption around methamphetamine production in North Carolina, California in the 80s that investigators later connected to politicians like Tony Coelho and major corporations like MCA, and eventually led to a shadowy scientist named Michael Risso, Rissonoscutio. Um, Rissonoscutio. All right, yeah, that's an interesting name for you. Familiar names like Ted Gunderson are relatively unknown names like and relatively unknown names like Robert Booth Nichols weave through this detailed epic that takes us to the Cabazon Indian Reservation in the California desert and to the deepest recesses of the 1980s Reagan Bush security apparatus. Gunderson, a retired FBI special agent in charge, SAC, from Los Angeles, and Nichols, a mysterious Los Angeles man exposed through court documents obtained by Seymour as being a career CIA operative connected with scientist programmer Riconoscudo in a sinister yet now very well documented phase of PROMIS development. In affidavits, Riconoscudo claimed that one of the tasks he performed at the Cabazon Reservation was to install a back door in the version of PROMIS that was sold to Canada. In August of this year, the RCMP investigators told Booth that Seymour and me both Seymour and me that they had traveled to the reservation several times and had confirmed many details of Seymour's research. They had also interviewed Riscono Scudo on more than, and by the way, I have a link in the description of this video for anyone who wants to jump in and talk about the FAA or share any information about what's going on with that and their computer software and what crashed. But with everyone else I talked to, both the Mounties and Seymour kept a reserved distance from him and always counted their fingers after every handshake. The last circle describes in detail how PROMIS software was modified by Riscuscio. Riconoscucio. I don't know how to say that, dude. It's and details to allegedly include the backdoor and eavesdropping capability, but also enhanced one form of AI and subsequently applied to the development of new weapons systems, including ethno-specific biowarfare compounds capable of attacking specific races. So let's read that again. The last circle describes in detail how PROMIS software was modified by this agent of the CIA to allegedly include the backdoor eavesdropping capability, but also enhanced with one form of AI and subsequently applied to the development of new weapon systems, including ethno-specific biowarfare compounds capable of attacking specific races. Ricono Scudo, now serving time in a federal prison in Pennsylvania, has a cell a very short distance away from fellow espionage inmates Edwin Wilson and Jonathan Pollard. While his tale is critical to understanding what has happened to PROMIS, the fact remains that Riconoscudo has been out of the loop and in legal trouble for 8 years, and he has been in a maximum security prison for at least 6. What was surprising was that in 1998, he contacted homicide detective Sue Todd in Hercules and told her that the murder of a father and a son, execution style, was connected to the PROMIS story. One connection was obvious. Hercules is a company town connected to a weapons manufacturer described in Seymour's book that also connects to the Cabonosa Island Indian Reservation. The three bills. I lived in Washington, D.C. from August 1994 until the late October 1995. It was during that time that I was a semi regular visitor at the Fairfax, Virginia home of Bill McCoy, a lovely 60 something giant, always adorned with a beret, who complained ruthlessly about what happened to the United States since the damn Yankee Army had taken over. Writers were scribblers, people who thought they knew something about covert operations without ever having seen one, were spooky groupies. Mac, as we call him, had his investigative fingers in almost everything, but he was most involved with PROMIS. McCoy was a retired chief warrant officer from the U.S. Army and Criminal Investigation Division. He had broken some of the biggest cases in history. It was Mac who first introduced me to both Bill Tyree and Bill Hamilton in 1994. I recall scratching my head as I would be sitting at Mac's dinner table when a call would come in from Hamilton asking if there was any new information from the Tyree. Not yet, McCoy would answer. I'll call as soon as I get something. How? I asked. Could a guy in maximum security prison like Walpole State Penitentiary in Massachusetts be getting information of such quality that someone like Hamilton would be calling urgently to see what he had come up with? That, answer McCoy, was the work of someone known only as the Sergeant Major, and alternately at His Eminence, who fed the information to Tyree, who in turn fed it to McCoy, who then passed it on to Hamilton. Sometimes, however, Tyree and Hamilton communicated directly. To this day, the identity of the Sergeant Major remains a mystery, and the puzzle piece pursued by the RCMP and when they had visited me in August 2000. So obviously, this guy is someone who was at Walpole State. It was also not by coincidence that in the same winter of 1994-95, McCoy revealed to me that he was using former Green Berets to conduct physical surveillance of the Washington, D.C. offices of Microsoft in connection with the PROMIS case. From the Wilderness has, within the last month, received information indicating that piracy of Microsoft products at the GE Aerospace Herndon facility were likely tied to a larger objective, possibly the total compromise of any Windows based product. It's not by chance that most of the military and half of the intelligence agencies in the US now operate on Unix or Macintosh systems. In late 1996, Tyree mailed me a detailed set of diagrams and a lengthy narrative explaining the exact hows and whys of the murder of Danny Casolaro, and an overview of all the PROMIS saga that is not only consistent with what is described by Seymour in The Last Circle, but also provides many new details. Those documents, as later described to me by RCMP investigator Sean McDade, proved to be awesome and right on the money. The essence of those documents was that not only had the Republicans under Meese exploited the software, but that the Democrats had also seen its potential and moved years earlier. Nowhere was this connection more clearly exposed than in understanding the relationship between three classmates from the U.S. Naval Academy: Jimmy Carter, Stansfield Turner, who was Carter's CIA director, and billionaire banker, presidential kingmaker, Carter's Annapolis roommate, Arkansas's Jackson Stevens. The Tyree diagrams laid out in detail how PROMIS, after improvement with AI, had allegedly been mated with the software of Jackson Stevens's firm, Systematics, now Axiom. I don't know what it is now, but in the late 1970s and early 80s, Systematics handled some Systematics handled some 60 to 70% of all electronic banking transactions in the US. The goal, according to the diagrams that laid out subsequently verified relationships between Stevens, Wolf and Bank and Lippo Group and the drug intelligence bank BCCI, was to penetrate every banking system in the world. This cabal could then use PROMIS both to predict and to influence the movement of financial markets worldwide. Stevens, truly bipartisan in his approach to profits, had been a lifelong supporter of George Bush, and he was at the same time the source of the $3 million loan that rescued the faltering Clinton campaign in early 1992. This is a great photograph of Stevens with younger George W. Bush in the excellent BCCI story, History, False Prophets. The book is called False Prophets, and it's spelled like this. In the fall of 1997, Bill McCoy, having recently gone off his heart medication, was found dead in his favorite chair. In the days and weeks before, he had been advised by Tyree that a Pakistani hitman on an Israel contract had been on the state seeking to fulfill a hit on McCoy. There had been other hints that someone closer to McCoy might do the job. Tyree recently told FTW that just before his death, he had given McCoy information on Elbit flash memory chips, allegedly designed at Kiryat Gat, south of Tel Aviv. The unique feature of the Elbit chips was that they worked on ambient electricity in a computer. In other words, they worked when the computer was turned off. When combined with another newly developed chip, the Petri, which was capable of storing up to 6 months' worth of keystrokes, it was now possible to burst transmit all of a computer's activity in the middle of the night to a nearby receiver, say in a passing truck or even a low-flying signals intelligence satellite. According to Tyree, this was the methodology used by Jonathan Pollard with the Israeli Mossad to compromise many foreign embassies in Washington. Within 48 hours of his death, Bill McCoy had been cremated, and in less than 4 days, all of Mac's furniture, records, and personal belongings had been removed from his home by his son, a full colonel in the U.S. Army. The house had been sanitized and repainted, and aside from the Zen garden in the backyard, there was no trace that McCoy had ever lived there. Former Assistant Secretary of Housing Catherine Austin Fitts has about as much ink on from the Wilderness Report as about anyone else. One of the Empire's Fitts threads, this might be a business call coming in, some actual work. I'm going to wait on that. One of the Empire's files threatened that of the Harvard endowment. Was that of the Harvard Endowment. The Harvard Endowment is not really a benevolent university fund, but an aggressive investment predator with $19 billion in assets. Some of the Harvard Endowment Fund, some from HUD subsidized housing. Harvard also has a number of other investments in high-tech defense operations and had a big hand in investing George W. Bush's lackluster firm Harken Energy. W has a Harvard MBA. Fitz's chief nemesis at Harvard, Herbert Pug Winokur, head of Capricorn Investments and member of the board of the Harvard Endowment, is also a PhD mathematician from Harvard, where the mathematical breakthroughs that gave rise to artificial intelligence using blockchain technology were first discovered. In the 60s, Winokur had done social science research for the Department of Defense on cause of inner-city unrest in the wake of the 1967 Detroit riots. The pioneering research at Harvard that allegedly gave rise to the artificial intelligence installed in PROMIS later moved north, according to a Harvard website. Much of the effort of the Harvard group, no longer based solely at Harvard, was centered on the International Network for Social Network Analysis, INSNA. INSNA. Jeez. Which was in Toronto. Things grew more suspicious as Fitz's research disclosed that Winokur, through Capricorn Investments, had a decisive role in the 1980s management of the intelligence government outsourcing megafirm Dynacorp of Reston, Virginia. Winokur served as Dynacorp CEO from 89 to 97. In juxtapose, Harvard and HUD differ in one striking respect, according to Fitz. The Harvard Endowment has enjoyed wildly uncharacteristic above-market tax-free returns for the last decade, 33% in 1999, while HUD in the same year was compelled to do a manual adjustment to reconcile a $59 billion shortfall between its accounts and the U.S. Treasury account. Wow. I was not surprised when Bill Hamilton confirmed that both Fitz and me that Winokur's DynCorp had played a role in the evolution of PROMIS in the 1980s. One other surprise was to come out of Fitz's investigation that had months earlier led her to conclude that she was up against PROMIS-related interests on the very day that DOJ and HUD had shut her down. She was discussing software developments with a Canadian firm that was at the heart of the Canadian space program, geomatics. The term geomatics applies to a related group of sciences, all involving satellite imagery, used to develop geographic information systems, global positioning systems, and remote sensing from space that can actually determine the locations of natural resources such as oil, precious metals, and other commodities. Now that we call this the National Geospatial Intelligence Center. I think that was created sometime in I'm not exactly sure. When was the National Geospatial Intelligence Center created? Someone look that up. Make sure you guys are still listening out there. Nope. That's crazy. Apparently centered in Canada, the geomatics industry offers consulting services throughout other worlds in English, German, Russian, French, Arabic, Spanish, and Chinese. Geomatics technology launched aboard the Canadian satellites via US, European, or Japanese boosters can help developing or industrialized nations inventory and manage all of their natural resources. There are also several geomatics related companies in the US, including one not far from the Johnston Space Center in Houston. This situation is custom made for enhanced PROMIS software with the backdoor technology. What better way to map and inventory all of the world's resources than by making each client nation pay for their work by providing the client nation's PROMIS-based software, as it would then be possible to compile a global database of every marketable natural resource, and it would not be necessary to even touch the resources because commodities and future markets exist for all of them. An AI-enhanced PROMIS-based program would then be the perfect setup to make billions of dollars in profits by watching and manipulating the world's political climate to trade in, let's say, tungsten figures, such as worldwide databases that would be even more valuable if there were, for example, a sudden surge in the price of gold or platinum. Bill Hamilton readily agreed that this was an ideal situation for the application of PROMIS technology. In furthering our research on geomatics, we discovered that almost everywhere geomatics technology went, we also found Lockheed Martin. Hey, good morning, guys. Yeah, thank you all for joining, guys. A shout out to AS, Paul Nielsen, Mike Williams, Jeremy Walter. What's up, buddy? Kevin Clark, Esoteric Gold in the house. Mike Williams, Bobby Broadway, Dan Foster. Dude, what's up with your coils, man? Why don't you jump on the stream? Links in the description of the video. Just click more info below. Yo, what up, man? Good morning, fellas. John Doe in the house. Matt Gaudet. So, anyone know what the heck is going on with this FAA computer hack in their computers? Because man, this let me fast forward a little bit to some more names, because that was a lot of the good information with those names that I showed you guys so far. So that should give you enough names and stuff to look up, and definitely check out those books, especially Sherry Seymour. And that's how I spell that. Yeah. Yeah, check out Sherry Seymour and her books on this if you guys are interested in that and learning more. I don't want to sit here and read the whole dang book, because it's pretty long. I'll read to the end part. I'll read the final part of it, just with some of the key stuff at the end, the conclusion. Yeah, right here. This is the barest glimpse of what PROMIS can do. Mated with artificial intelligence, it is capable of analyzing not only an individual's, but also a community's entire life in real time. It is also capable of issuing warnings when irregularities appear and of predicting future movements based on past behavior. In the financial arena, PROMIS is even more formidable. Not only is it capable of predicting movements in financial markets and tracking trades in real time, it has been reported on a number of occasions to have been used via the back door to enter secret bank accounts, including accounts in Switzerland, and then remove the money in those accounts without being traced. Court documents filed in the various INSLAW trials include documentation of this ability, as well as affidavits and declarations from Israeli intelligence officers and assets. The key question that lingered after the meetings with the RCMP was how many versions of the software had the CIA and the US government given out, and might they not have been also using a backdoor against friendly nations for economic motives to give advantage to US companies? It was not a question that the RCMP dismissed it as unlikely. In another mind boggling development, on November 10th, the Calgary Sun reported U.S. police said many of the suspected Al Qaeda terrorists were nabbed through the use of a state of the art computer software program called PROMIS. The system interfaces with any database and can provide information on credit card, banking, personal, pension, um, tax, criminal, and immigration records. Police can input an alleged terrorist name or credit card in the software, will provide details of the person's movements through purchases or phone records. The Fox story reported that Osama bin Laden once boasted that his youth knew the wrinkles of the world's financial markets like the back of their hands, and that his money would never be frozen. He may be right, and in an administration so lost in covering up criminal conduct, no less than the conduct of the ones who preceded it, while trying to fight a war at the same time, might find itself doubly wounded by the software of Bill Hamilton and Inslaw. And if you think that Bill Tyree's descriptions of the capabilities of enhanced PROMIS progeny are exaggerated, then consider the following recent developments from official sources. At Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, for example, the military's Alternative Control Technology Laboratory has experimented with systems that allow pilots to fly by thought. By controlling their brain waves, human subjects at the laboratory can steer a flight simulator left or right, up or down, a skill that most people at the lab can master in only an hour. Caltech researchers have invented a neurochip that connects to a network of living brain cells wired together through electrodes incorporated onto a silicon chip. The neurochips were unveiled at the annual meeting of the Society for Neuroscience held in New Orleans the week of October 23rd and 30th, 1997. Now, yes, for more information, I suggest you guys read this. This is a great book for detailed information on 9/11 and how it relates to the aerospace technologies industries and a variety of. This is a great investigation. Michael Ruppert's a top notch investigator and much better than the official investigation. The official 9/11 probe was not really trying to find the truth. It doesn't seem so. Anyways, yeah, I just want to say that until we find out what the heck is really going on, you know. Until next time, have a good morning, guys, and always question the official story.